A village frozen in time. The camera drifts gently over a quiet countryside in central France. A church bell stands still, its sound forever silenced. Empty windows stare blankly from blackened stone buildings. No voices, no laughter, only wind. This is Oradour-sur-Glane, a village left untouched since June 10th, 1944. What could have turned this peaceful place into a monument of ashes? Only 4 days earlier, the Allied invasion of Normandy had begun. D-Day had shaken the German high command. Fear, anger, and desperation consumed the retreating Nazi forces, and in the chaos, the Waffen-SS Das Reich division moved south through France, brutal, battle-hardened, and bloodthirsty. They were delayed by French resistance attacks, bridges blown, railroads sabotaged. Each hour lost to guerrilla tactics deepened their hatred, not for soldiers, but for civilians. And then they arrived at Oradour, a village with no resistance presence, no weapons, no reason to fear. But to the Waffen-SS, that didn't matter. The Das Reich soldiers, under orders from Sturmbannführer Adolf Dieckmann, surrounded the village. "We only came for an inspection," they said. Women and children were told to gather in the church. Men were led to barns and garages for questioning. Nobody knew. These were their last steps. The village and the division. Oradour-sur-Glane was not a place of war. It was a quiet, modest village in the Limousin region of France, known for its stone houses, red-tiled roofs, cobbled streets, and a simple church at its heart. The people were farmers, shopkeepers, teachers. Their lives revolved around the rhythm of the land. Not politics, not rebellion, just survival. Children rode bicycles, bakers sold fresh bread, school bells rang. There were no resistance fighters here, no hidden weapons. No German patrols had ever been harmed in this village. And yet, this is where the Waffen-SS chose to strike. The Das Reich division, led by SS Sturmbannführer Adolf Dieckmann, had seen hell on the Eastern Front, fighting Soviet partisans, losing comrades in brutal winters, watching villages burn. They became hardened, not just as soldiers, but as executioners. Now, ordered to move north to halt the Allied advance after D-Day, their progress was delayed by resistance sabotage in the forests and hills of southern France. They saw civilians not as innocents, but as collaborators. By the time they reached Oradour, they were looking for a message to send. But Oradour had done nothing. That made it the perfect target. Because what better way to spread terror than to destroy a village that was never a threat? The slaughter at Oradour. June 10th, 1944, early afternoon. The SS vehicles arrived without warning. Soldiers spread out in precision, blocking exits, sealing roads. The village was surrounded. Loudspeakers echoed through the narrow streets. "All residents, assemble in the village square. This is a routine identity check." No one suspected what was coming. The villagers obeyed, confused but calm. After all, Oradour had nothing to hide. Once gathered, the separation began. Men were ordered into barns, garages, stables, under guard. Women and children, over 400 of them, were herded into the church. Then, at precisely 3 p.m., the SS began their work. The barns. SS soldiers set up machine guns facing the men, positioned low, aimed at their legs. They opened fire, not to kill instantly, but to maim, to cripple. Then, with the men screaming and crawling, they piled hay, wood, and gasoline around the wounded. They set the buildings on fire. Those who tried to escape were shot. The church. At the same time, inside the church, women and children heard the gunfire, followed by the deafening boom of a gas bomb thrown inside. Blinding smoke filled the air. Those who tried to flee through the doors or windows were mowed down with machine guns. SS soldiers tossed grenades and set the church alight. Some tried to shield their babies, others suffocated, some burned alive. Only one woman, Marguerite Ruffenche, managed to escape. Shot 5 times, she climbed through a sacristy window and hid in a garden. She lived to tell the world what happened. By nightfall, the SS withdrew. The village was still burning, the smell of ash, blood and gasoline thick in the air. 642 people were dead, men, women, infants, entire families, wiped out. And the name Oradour-sur-Glane, the aftermath and society's response. When the SS troops pulled out of Oradour-sur-Glane, they left behind a blackened skeleton of a village. The smell of smoke lingered for days. The bodies were never buried. They lay there, burned, twisted, fused into the ruins, a grotesque testament to what had happened. Children's bicycles melted to the ground. Pots still sat on kitchen stoves. The clock in the church stopped forever at 4 p.m. France was shattered. News of the massacre spread slowly, carried by whispers, refugees, resistance messengers. But when it reached the outside world, France was stunned. Even amidst the chaos of World War II, even in a nation under occupation, Oradour stood out. There had been battles, there had been arrests, but this was a slaughter of an entire village, of children, of grandmothers, and yet the war raged on. There could be no immediate justice, no tribunal, no reckoning. The liberation of France was still weeks away. A village frozen in time. After the war, Charles de Gaulle made a decision. Oradour would never be rebuilt. This village must never rise again. It will speak for the dead and accuse the living. The burned-out ruins were left exactly as the SS had left them. Blackened walls, collapsed roofs, rusted cars, a melted pram near the church door. No reconstruction, no restoration. Oradour became a ghost village, not abandoned, but preserved. A permanent open wound, so that no one would forget what hate can do. Today, visitors walk silently through its ruins. They don't just see what happened, they feel it. The silence is overwhelming. It is the silence of 642 voices that were never heard again. Legacy, lessons, and moral weight. Remembering the dead. Today, on the edge of the ruins, stands the Centre de la Mémoire d'Oradour, a museum and memorial built not to explain but to confront. Inside are the names, faces, and belongings of the 642 victims. A schoolbook, a doll, a pair of burned glasses found near the altar. Every year, survivors, descendants, and visitors from around the world come to lay flowers, say prayers, and ask the same question. Why? Why them? Why this village? Why this silence before death? Justice, or the lack of it. After the war, several members of the SS Das Reich division were arrested. In 1953, 21 soldiers were brought to trial in Bordeaux. But the trial sparked controversy. 14 of the accused were Alsatians, French citizens forcibly conscripted by Nazi Germany. Many were pardoned or given light sentences. For the survivors of Oradour, it was a second betrayal. The court may have spoken in legal terms, but to the villagers, justice had been denied. One survivor said bitterly, "They killed us twice, once in the fire and once in the courtroom." The uncomfortable legacy. Unlike other war crimes, Oradour-sur-Glane was not a reprisal. There had been no resistance attack, no ambush, no threat. These people died for nothing. No cause, no retaliation, no logic, only cruelty, only hatred. That's what gives Oradour its enduring moral weight. They did not resist, they did not fight, yet they were massacred. So what does that mean? Does silence protect us, or does it make us vulnerable? In classrooms across France, students study Oradour, not just as a historical fact, but as a philosophical question. Because if innocence is no shield, then silence is not safety. An open ending and questions left behind. From village to memorial. It began with a quiet village. Cobblestone streets, Sunday bells, children riding bicycles. The kind of place where time moved slowly. But on June 10th, 1944, time stopped. And now, Oradour-sur-Glane remains frozen in that moment. A village turned into an eternal witness, its ruins left untouched, its silence louder than any scream. How many more Oradours? History remembers this place. But what about the ones it forgot? The villages without survivors, the towns too small to make headlines, the victims buried without names. How many Oradours were never recorded? How many stories ended before they began? What happened here was not an isolated act of madness. It was part of a system, repeated across Europe, where innocence offered no immunity and silence no protection. The final question. We often ask, who pulled the trigger? Who gave the order? But perhaps the most haunting question is, who remembered and who chose to forget? Because memory is a battlefield too, and in the end, as the wind moves through the burned-out walls of Oradour, one last question echoes through the broken stones. But was that really the whole story?